Welcome to Caregiving and Dementia. In this presentation, we're going to talk about understanding responsive behaviors. We'll address some of the common challenges that you're experiencing, and you'll quickly realize that you're not alone in trying to figure out and manage some of the unexpected behaviors that you've observed at home with your loved one.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Brush. I am the Program Director at the National Center for Montessori and Aging at Crossway Community in Kensington, Maryland. I'm very glad that you've joined us today for this Caregiver Education Series.
This presentation has been developed by Montgomery County, Maryland's Caregiver Support Program and the National Center for Montessori and Aging in collaboration with me, Jennifer Brush. I am a researcher and a speech-language pathologist in the area of dementia care. I work with families and care communities to help make their lives easier when caring for someone with dementia. I'm also the program director at the National Center for Montessori and Aging in Kensington, Maryland. I'm sure you've noticed that very often people with dementia communicate with us by using actions, words, or gestures that we may not understand or find very difficult to interpret. But these actions or behaviors are actually an expression of something important about their personal, social, or physical environment. We refer to these as responsive behaviors because the person is responding to an unmet need and doesn't know how or is unable to express this in words. Responsive behaviors can be frustrating and challenging for care partners and can occur suddenly and at any stage of dementia. As a caregiver, if you're frustrated and exhausted by responsive behaviors, first of all, please know you are not alone. A person living with dementia simply can't think the way that you do. Our natural instinct is to try and control these behaviors that we don't like, but unfortunately that only makes it worse. It leaves everybody frustrated and angry. We all have a need to have meaning and purpose in our life, and what we've discovered is that many of these behaviors are actually driven by the need of the person with dementia to be productive in their life. If you think about it, the word dementia often carries a reputation for causing negative, bad, or disruptive behaviors. Disruptive behaviors may seem negative to us, but they're often just a method that people with dementia use to express their feelings when words fail them. I'm asking you to take a step back and really imagine yourself in that person's shoes. Then we're better able to interpret this behavior. The good news is that if we can adjust our behavior, we can truly improve the situation. In part one of this presentation, you will develop an understanding of the causes of responsive behaviors. In part two of this presentation, you'll learn how to prevent responsive behaviors and engage your loved one in activities that are truly meaningful to them. When we're able to put ourselves in the person's shoes and perhaps look at dementia differently, we're then able to empower people to care for themselves and others, make contributions to their community, and engage in meaningful activities. You might think that this isn't possible, that you have to do everything for someone with dementia. But at many stages of dementia, people are able to live a very active life and do a lot for themselves. Sometimes in trying to be the very best caregivers that we can, we really do too much for our loved ones. When your loved one is engaged in doing things they enjoy, your burden, stress, and assistance time is actually decreased. Best of all, it really doesn't take a lot of money or time to get someone started in participating in more activities around the home. The first step to understanding and recognizing responsive behaviors is to understand that the person is not doing this to annoy you. I understand it may seem that way sometimes, but your loved one has a brain disorder that causes certain responses and actions that he has no control over. They are not asking you the same question repeatedly on purpose. If they realized they were doing that, they would probably be very embarrassed. Take a moment to imagine having a very uncomfortable sore on your heel. Every afternoon you take a walk with your wife. Every afternoon the sore on your heel becomes worse, and then it throbs all evening. Now imagine that you can't think of the word heel, and you're having trouble expressing the feeling of pain to your wife. How would you feel? What might you do? Most likely you'd feel frustrated and maybe embarrassed or inadequate. You might refuse to go on a walk or make gestures and sounds that don't make any sense to your wife. Your spouse may think you're being rude and obnoxious. Understanding and preventing behaviors begins with asking yourself, why is this behavior happening? The more questions we ask, the closer we are to determining the cause. Simple daily events can result in changes in a person's actions. For example, taking a shower. Asking a person to take a shower may result in a fight or an outburst just because they feel uncomfortable bathing, but they have no idea how to express it to you. Something a person did or said can trigger a responsive behavior. Perhaps you said something and it was misinterpreted, and then it caused an unexpected reaction. At times, differences in lightings, such as dimmer lighting at the end of the day, may cause a person to see strange shadows, and that's very uncomfortable for them. We call all of these things triggers. If we can figure out what is causing the behavior and why it's happening, then we can help to prevent the behavior.
People living with dementia work very hard all day to make sense of what's going on around them. This can be exhausting. When you're tired or frustrated, you're not able to function at your best either. So just imagine spending each and every day having trouble understanding what's said to you or missing some information every time you have a conversation. It's really no wonder that we see people act in ways that are labeled as disruptive. How can we help our friends and our loved ones? By trying to understand what they're going through, by changing our expectations of them, and most of all, by keeping things simple.
This is when you have to be an investigator and problem solver. Think about all of the things that might be impacting your loved one. What was going on in the house right before the behavior happened? Could your loved one be in pain, tired, cold? The next question is addressed to the person with dementia. Why are you trying to leave the house? Why are you emptying all the milk containers? Why did you call the police? Whatever the question might be. Often this simple question sheds light on the problem and offers a solution. Of course, sometimes the person doesn't know and can't express why they're doing something. That's when we need to try and be the interpreter. So for example, if your loved one stops washing her hair, look at the situation surrounding showering. Was the bathroom recently remodeled with a new shower head? Maybe the person used to always shower in the morning, and now you've changed their schedule and you're asking them to shower at night. If we can figure out why it's happening, we can change our behavior or change the routine at home to stop the problem. Sometimes when we're responding to someone's behaviors, care partners react by removing an item that's being used inappropriately or by restricting movement because of safety concerns. And honestly, this is not always the best solution for someone with dementia. So let me give you an example. If your loved one tries to leave the house every morning and argues with you when you ask him to stay in the house, your immediate reaction might be to lock all the doors. Instead, I want you to think about, why is my husband leaving the house? Is there something in the house that's bothering him? Would he like to go and work in the garden? Would he like to go for a walk? Perhaps in the past he was in the habit of leaving for work or walking the dog right after breakfast. I've found that in these situations, sometimes it really helps to keep a journal. So I've mentioned that these behaviors or actions are often in response to something going on around people that's difficult for them to handle. Since it's problematic for them to communicate feelings or needs verbally, they react by hitting or withdrawing, even leaving the area. There's a number of reasons why they might exhibit these behaviors. Each individual is unique, and so their experience in dementia is going to be unique. Everybody experiences dementia in a different way. We need to rely on what we know about the person and their past and present habits to try and figure out a cause. I find it's very helpful if you keep a journal for several days in a row to take notes about when these behaviors occur and why you think it might be happening. So these are some examples of journal entries that you might make. You should note a description of the behavior and then your best guess to why it's happening. So as I mentioned, we always start by asking why. We come up with some solutions that we think might meet the person's needs, and we test those solutions. We have to be flexible. What works today may not work tomorrow. And we have found that the best way to prevent responsive behaviors is to engage the person in meaningful activity. Montessori is a philosophy of life that engages people in activity that is meaningful, activity that has a purpose. Some of you may have heard about Montessori for kids. It's not just for kids, it's for all of us at any age. It's an approach that helps your loved one to be independent. It's an approach that gives someone with dementia meaning and purpose in their life. I'd like to tell you about my friend Henry. It's the middle of the night. He walks into a dark kitchen, he feels for the knob and opens a drawer to the left of the sink. He pushes the utensils from side to side, touching and removing each and every one, inspecting the spoons and spatulas, then shaking his head before placing each one back in a hurried, disorderly fashion. He slams the drawer. "Not in here," he mutters as he moves to the next drawer and opens that. "What in God's name are you doing in here so early?" yells his wife. She stomps from the bedroom. "It's not even 5 o'clock. Stop that and come back to bed." Unfortunately, this scene is all too common for homes in which someone is living with dementia. Henry's wife, Evelyn, is exhausted, and for good reason. She's tired of being awakened early in the morning by the slamming of drawers, and she's weary from trying to convince her husband to go back to bed. She's drained of energy by putting her household back into place each day after Henry rearranges anything. Thinking she was being clever, Evelyn tried to remove everything from the kitchen drawers except for the few most needed items, but that seemed to make Henry even more agitated. What do you think she can do to make this stop? Right? She doesn't want Henry to live in a nursing home, but she truly can't take this any longer. Using a Montessori approach, we would consider Henry's total situation. In his younger years, he had an active career as a teacher. He could also fix anything. He loved puttering in the garage, building window boxes and birdhouses for the garden and growing vegetables. It's very likely that Henry's looking for one of his tools or something to do each morning when he's rummaging in the kitchen. What appears to be irrational and random is actually an effort at having meaning and purpose in his life. If he has always liked to fix things, perhaps he wants to feel useful or helpful. We all like to have something meaningful to do. Henry may not be able to use power tools, build a complicated birdhouse, or change the oil in the car anymore, but given the opportunity, and if needed a little bit of assistance, He could sand and paint an already constructed bird feeder, pick the vegetables, and wash the car. So his wife set up a card table in the kitchen with items to repair, sand, paint, or assemble. And we found that these really held Henry's attention, and they created a useful distraction for Henry's rummaging in the drawers. So if his energies are redirected toward his natural abilities, and if Evelyn offers him choice in things to do based on his interests, she will be able to establish a balance and harmony in her home.
Hi folks, I'd like to tell you about a client that I've just finished working with, a woman with frontotemporal dementia, who I had trouble figuring out what her spared abilities were and how to help her find things to do that gave her life meaning. And as subtle as it is, what I came up with was that she had difficulty using her hands for anything functional. So I noticed that she was very happy when she was looking out the window. So what we did with that is we turned her chair and her little station around to look out the window, where she could see her gardens and she could even see cars going by, which seemed to keep her happy. And we expanded on that by putting a bird feeder out there, and they're going to even put a bird bath. And because she liked looking at things, we also put simple bird identification books and flowers beside her that she pages through. And this really seemed to occupy a lot of her day. And as simple as it seems, it helped the family and her a lot. And from that, there was a springboard of ideas, and the daughter found that looking at Pinterest with her mother was a really nice conversation between the two of them, and really eased her mother's anxiety and kept them very close. So those were two ideas that we got: the turning of the chair and the bird feeders, which then had a rippling effect. The other thing is she was wandering around after her meals, seeming to be a bit lost. So I gave her a sponge. They have a big butcher block table in the middle of their kitchen, and I gave her a sponge, and with hand over hand and a lot of repetition, got her so that she could wipe the counter. And again, as small as that may seem, that really helped her and seemed to make her feel helpful at the end of a meal. So those are two ideas that helped with her.
When you look at your loved one living with dementia, it's really hard not to constantly be reminded of how they've changed. But if you talk to people with dementia, they will tell you they are still the same person, and they want you to focus on what they can do.
So we've talked about the need to ask why and to figure out what those triggers are, and then remove those things, if we can, that are bothering the person, and instead engage them in meaningful activities. There are really a lot of things that people with dementia can do. What we'd like to talk to you about in part 2 of this presentation is what types of activities are meaningful for people and how you can begin to establish those in your home. So please join us for part 2 of understanding responsive behaviors. If you liked this presentation and you'd like to learn more, Montgomery County offers an array of resources and educational opportunities for caregivers, and the National Center for Montessori and Aging offers educational workshops for families and healthcare professionals at Crossway Community in Kensington.